Good morning, everybody. I forgot to turn that one camera off while we're setting up, but everybody can hear me. Now, let's welcome. You know what? Let's switch the intro and switch right to our guests. Let's switch to Trevor, Woolfe, and Honza Catchpole. This is a breaking news special. Now everybody can see me, and I'm quite excited to have these two gentlemen join me because they are VP Exploration and VP Corp Development for GR Silver. GR Silver announced a big acquisition this morning. The company is growing and adding ground in the Rosario Mining District, and I'm excited to have these two gentlemen here on the program to discuss that acquisition with me. Good morning, gentlemen. How are you?
Yeah, good. Thanks,
How are you,
Kai.
That's great to have you on. And let's dive right in. So La Trinidad, you announced the acquisition or the intent to acquire the project over a year ago. So it feels like a year and a half ago, and now it's finally come to fruition. Trevor, why don't you run us through that whole process? Why did it take a year and a half to get to today?
Look, it's a big acquisition, and it's a project where the owner of the project had been working on it. They had an operating mine there up until the end of 2019. So there are a few things that needed to be sorted out before we could go ahead with the acquisition. We also needed to do our own due diligence, which included technical due diligence, financial and legal due diligence. And there was a bit of work to do on that. But it's really worth doing in the end. And as you see, we've gone ahead with the acquisition now.
Yeah, exactly. And lots to do. Like the press release itself is 11 pages long, so there's a lot to digest in there and lots to talk about. Run us through the acquisition terms real quick, since we're on the topic of the acquisition itself.
Yeah, so the portfolio includes 12 concessions in the Rosario Mining District, which are adjacent to our flagship properties, which are Plomosas and San Marcial, where we already have an NI 43-101 resource of 29 million ounces of silver and in indicated, and another 10 million ounces of inferred in silver. So they're very strategic. The portfolio is very strategic for us. It includes over 1,000 square kilometers of concessions. The main one is the La Trinidad concession, which is just to the southwest of Plomosas and San Marcial. Now, because it's quite a complex situation, but a relatively simple deal in the end. The acquisition is $50,000 Canadian, as well as a 1% net smelter royalty, return royalty to the vendor. And there is a buyout on that of $2 million, a one-time payment of $2 million to buy out that royalty. There are, of course, some outstanding tax payments to the Mexican government due to previous non-payment by the vendor. So we're taking on those. Look, these are things that we will be sitting down with the Mexican government and discussing this in future. And we're looking forward to getting on the ground and doing some work, because this ground is highly prospective and has a lot of targets.
Beautiful segue to our second guest, Honza Catchpole. Honza, grüß dich, hallo. Schön, dass du da bist. Wir können uns auf Deutsch unterhalten. We can talk in German as well. You are German, so it's great to have you on. But let's talk about the prospectivity. So what did you actually buy in terms of ground? Like what's there?
So what we're looking at is a portfolio of 12 projects, 12 concessions, which the key ones is the Cimarron project and the Trinidad concessions. And we're looking at over 100,000 hectares of concession lands, and we have and it's a huge. There's one past producing gold mine on it, the Trinidad gold mine, and we also have quite a lot of different prospects, about 24 known ones, and then we have a lot of the company's exploration projects, and they did quite a lot of work in that area. So we have it's a rich property position.
Yeah, it's a massive property position as well, from what I've seen on the figure as well. And now you make mention of one certain area in particular in the press release, and that's the Gap area. Why is that one so significant?
So the gap area is important because it's connecting our current two key projects apart from the acquisition, which is the San Marcial area and the Plomosas area. So we have been doing quite a lot of work in those two areas, but we've recognized there's a trend which connects these two concessions. And the gap area is a kind of a little piece of land which is on the Trinidad concession, which connects these two. And so it is important. We can see that the mineralized structures they continue from the Plomosas to San Marcial, and the gap areas is quite important area for us to focus.
Is that also the first area that you're going to target aggressively, as you mentioned in your press release, aggressive exploration program? Is that the low hanging fruit you might be targeting first?
It can be. We'll have different approaches. We'll have different teams working in different areas, and the gap area will be something that we're looking at specifically because we are right now doing an IP survey, geophysical survey over that area, and we're going to have new data coming out fairly soon on that, and so that will give us a kind of a jump into going to the field and getting work done there.
To focus in on that, like you said, you're still working on it. You got various teams. In Trinidad, the ground is massive. You also brought, I think it's called Cimarron, which is to the north of Rosario, the city itself. What did you acquire there? What part is that?
So Cimarron is historic. It's a gold prospect, which formerly there was we have a 43-101 on that, and they have an inferred resource of about I think 77 million ounces of gold on that, but that's a historic
77,000 ounces, just to pull you up on that, Honza.
Sorry, yeah. And
we wish.
But that's an old let's say old resource report estimate, and it is a little bit different animal geologically, but it is also it's a gold deposit basically. Hosted related to intrusions in that area.
Honza, we're going to come back to you in 1 second. I've got a question for Trevor, and I've seen that the Trinidad was a fully permitted mine and they operated till 2019. So a couple questions in that. And A, why did they shut down in 2019? And B, was the permit, was that part of the reason you acquired the project? And what's your plan to do with that?
Look, it's definitely an advantage having an operation there that's already permitted. If we wanted to do something in the area, whether it's on the Trinidad ground or even potentially with some of our projects that we've already got, then having an operation that's fully permitted is a distinct advantage. The mine itself, it was first mined by Eldorado back in the 90s, but then Orogold came in and explored and found some additional resources below the old pit, and started mining there in the 2014, 2015 it was. So they mined there up until 2018. Actually, one of the reasons why it was closed down was because of Hurricane Willa, which came through Mexico. Some of your viewers might remember that was a fairly significant hurricane that came off the Pacific coast and headed inland and pretty much tracked straight over the top of the La Trinidad pit. So unfortunately, it caused some damage. There was some flooding involved there, and the pit was flooded, and there was some structural damage done as well to that pit. Luckily, I guess, with the mine plan the way it was at the time, they'd almost finished with their mining there, so there wasn't too much left in the pit that they had outlined at that point.
Interesting. Okay, and how does that fit into your PEA plans now for the future? I know PEA is in the works, and resource estimate first, but how does that fit in the strategy now?
Look, there's a lot going on. As you know, we've already got that resource I mentioned at San Marcial, where we're doing this geophysical program at the moment, which will extend up into the gap area. We picked up Plomosas back in March of last year, and we've been very aggressive working on that over the last 12 months. We expect to, given that we picked up that project and it already had over 560 drill holes on it, but never had an NI 43-101 resource, even though there's an underground mine there that Grupo Mexico operated up until 2001. So look, we're expecting to come out with a couple of resources on Plomosas and also the San Juan area, and we're expecting that over the next 2 months. So that's the first thing that will come out, the resources on the two areas in Plomosas, and that will then lead on to our maiden sort of PEA that will look at Plomosas, but we'll also take into account San Marcial, given that San Marcial is only about 5 kilometres to the south of Plomosas. So there's potential synergies there where we can incorporate the two projects. Now, looking at La Trinidad, obviously there's a lot of work for us to do. We're not looking at going in and starting up the La Trinidad mine. I mean, we see excellent potential there for exploration. And we've got a lot of data. We've picked up a lot of data from Origold, and we'll be synthesizing that data, reviewing that data, and prioritizing the areas that we want to go and do exploration there. So the PEA initially will be focused on Plomosas and San Marcial, and then we may be able to incorporate what we find in La Trinidad after that.
Great. You almost took away my next question. That was for Honza, actually. Like, how big is the treasure chest in terms of data you acquired now? And I know Plomosas had a lot of unassayed core, a lot of core results that you could work through. What did you acquire now for La Trinidad, and how excited are you about what you find or what you're finding there?
So I'm personally quite excited. When I started looking over the data, it's you can really see that there's a majority of the property has been covered with stream sediment work, and we have over 9,000 soil samples in soil grids that have been laid in the key areas, and there's a trend of mineral deposits and work that has been done in, and you can. It really is it's a big chest of data. It's a treasure chest, as you said.
And from your point of view, like Honza, like aggressive exploration program, or planning to accelerate aggressively the exploration program, what is that going to entail? You mentioned you're going to fly geophysics over the area, the gap area, but what else do you plan for La Trinidad at this point?
So we're starting to set up the first step of all. It's good just go organize the data in a proper format, and then we're gonna once we've done that, we're gonna see what we can do. And as you said, we're going to do some systematic approach at large scale work on there. We haven't defined the exact program yet, but we will be starting on key areas which have been identified for. We might be looking at deposits which are between the Trinidad pit and San Cristobal area. So San Cristobal is one of the key prospects there, mentioned in the news release, and we might be looking at that first. But in terms of general exploration, we're looking into geophysical surveys that we're going to do of the area and do a little bit of a compilation.
And Trevor, a couple more follow-up questions there. On the acquisition, you mentioned that, or in the press release, you mentioned that Mako still has to obtain the closure plan certification. And what do they need to do there? Like, how active do they have to be involved on the project, and what does it cost them? Actually, I'm just curious.
So they have taken or kept the responsibility of following through with the plan of closure of that mine. So they have the responsibility to go ahead and continue the reclamation, which they've been working on, and they're on site at the moment, still working on that. And they have to continue to do that until they can get certified by the government that they've complied with all their requirements for reclamation. Now, the cost of that, I'm not sure. You'd have to speak to them about that. I'm just curious
because it's part of the sort of terms, right? So I was just trying to get a handle of the overall acquisition value as well. But also, let's switch gears. Let's go back to La Trinidad, the concessions themselves. Like in one of the figures, you mentioned that there are non-core concessions as well, especially I think it's to the east. So what's the plan with those? Like, non-core obviously means they're, I wouldn't say worthless, but they're obviously not focus areas. What's the plan with those?
Yeah. I mean, our definition of those is really about how advanced they are with respect to their exploration. And the core assets are essentially the assets, the concessions that make up the La Trinidad area. So there's one major concession there, and there's I think 3 or 4 different smaller internal concessions within that area. The other one is Cimarron, which, as Honza mentioned before, there's already a resource. There's already a gold resource, historic resource. For concessions, there are 2 out to the west, 2 small ones out to the west, and there's another 3 up to the north of La Trinidad. Now, these have very little work done on them at this point. There's also 2, to the southwest, Salto and Salto Sur. Now, those 2 are large. They're very large concessions, and they have quite high concession taxes due on them. So they don't have very much work done on them to date. So their priorities are lower in our listing. We'll be looking to explore different business opportunities on those non-core concessions to try and reduce our liabilities and our expenditure.
I was going to say, you worked really hard to acquire the La Trinidad concessions. Why give them up now? So I'm curious, sell them. Might be part of finance that as well. And I think that's a good segue. Finance real quick. Since I have you on, Trevor, let's talk about plans. Of course, you mentioned, I keep coming back to it, aggressive exploration program. It all costs money. What are the plans moving forward?
Yeah, that's right. As you know, we did a bought deal last year and raised $9.1 million. So we still have a fair bit of that in the bank. We've been aggressive. We've been doing a lot of exploration over the last 12 months. We do have an option payment coming up to exercise the San Marcial project, which is 2.5 million Canadian dollars coming up in May. Now, I mean, that's a fantastic acquisition. That same property was up for sale around 10 years ago for about $15 million American. So for us to be able to pick up that project for 2.5 million Canadian is a great acquisition. So look, at some stage in the future, of course, we'll be looking for more funding. But I think what we need to do with La Trinidad at this stage is get into the data, really see what we is a huge database, as Honza mentioned before. We need to get into there and really examine the information, understand it, and to prioritize what our targets are there before we can put together a real good budget for the exploration program. We know we want to do a lot of work there. The access is good. And we've got a lot of, we know there's a lot of structures that go into that ground. We understand the area, having the San Marcial and Plomosas ground adjacent. So we've got some things that we want to follow up on, but we really need to analyze all of the existing data before we make any firm plans on that.
Fantastic. I think we talked enough about La Trinidad. I think lots of work to do, lots of data to analyze. Let's sum it up for GR Silver. What are the next steps? You mentioned resource update coming in the next 2 months, most likely. What else is in the pipeline that we, as investors, can look forward to?
Yeah, look, as Honza mentioned before, we've got it's a ground geophysical program that's happening right now on San Marcial. Now that will finish over the next month or so, and we'll extend that over the gap area. So we'll get some information on the San Marcial geophysics. We'll get some geophysical information over the gap area. We've got we're still doing some drilling on the Plomosas property, so both in San Juan and Plomosas mine area. So we'll expect some more results on that leading into the 2 resources that we expect over the next couple of months. They're the key things over the next few months. And then we'll be continuing our exploration on the other projects, which will come out with information. But the next thing after that, we'll be looking into the PEA later in the year.
Great. I think that's it for today. We can't wait to get you back on soon. It was great talking. Honza, maybe we'll do a special episode just on geology.
And just in German.
Oh, and in German, und auf Deutsch.
Gerne.
Fantastic. No, thanks for joining us, gentlemen. This was great. It was a great update on La Trinidad. I think we got a great handle now on what the situation is, like what did you acquire and what it looks like going forward. So really appreciate you joining us. Everybody else, thanks for tuning in. This was a breaking news special here on SF Live. My name is Kai Hoffman. I'm the CEO of the Soar Financial Group. And make sure to follow us on YouTube, follow us on Twitter, hit that like and subscribe button. Don't forget to turn on the bell notification as well. As we do, as you've noticed, we do all our interviews live, and hiccups do happen, but that's your advantage as well, because you can look the executive straight in the eye, get the information firsthand, and be ahead of the replay crowd as well. And why don't you use that advantage to your advantage? Thanks for joining us. We'll be back later.